helping me with this today. Now more than ever, I realize and appreciate the help that the lay readers give in the service. Jane, Gwenny, and who are the Glenda? Any others have led services here? Lee and Pat, yes. Gail, all of you that have helped with these things. It's really awesome. We found great encouragement in the times that we were able to tune in over the last several years through the pandemic, when Pastor Lloyd was still here, and then after he was gone, when you began to take over some of the services. And as recently as a month or two ago, I think we were able to tune in to a service that Glenda did and Jane did, and each of you touched us in a way in that service that was needed. And so never think that what you're doing the Spirit doesn't take it and use it to help us and to encourage us. Appreciate that. Well, Mel sent me a message and asked if I would be willing to take the service today on the 16th of April. He said our lay leaders are really getting tired. And so she caught me in a weak moment and sent her a message back. I said, okay, yes, that looks good. Let me check, make sure we're not going to be with one of the kids that weekend, and I will do it. Well, I waited, and about a week and a half later, I still heard nothing back from Mel, and I thought, okay, they found somebody else to do it. So I sent her a text. I thought, this is unlike Mel. Mel's very prompt, right? So I sent her a text message. The first message was on the WhatsApp program on the phone, which we use with our kids. And we used to use it here because we couldn't use our phone with no cell service. But that's changed. So I sent Mel a text saying, by the way, you sent me a message asking if I would come. And I'm guessing it was in WhatsApp. Maybe you should have a look at it. So she did, and she said, you said yes. Wow. Well, apparently WhatsApp, whoever controls WhatsApp, decided that I was in the archives. And Mel's messages, all from me, went to her archives, so she didn't see them. They weren't visible for her to see. And maybe that's where I've been. Archive. Hiding. I said, well, maybe that was the Spirit, though, telling me really. But I have to say that in our hiding, and I'm a person that does enjoy solitude. That's one of the things that I do enjoy. I don't mind being alone, and there's all kinds of stuff to do. But the family has decided that there's stuff that we can do too, and so they keep having kids and inviting us to come and stay with them, and that's been wonderful, and that's one of the big places where we've been hiding in our retirement, and we're very grateful and blessed to be able to do that. My son David called me this morning, and he's renovating his house and by himself and his wife and little Oliver Randall. They're up in Red Deer with her parents, coming home tomorrow. He's been gone 2 weeks, and so he called me and showed me his house. And he said, oh yeah, you're doing a service today, aren't you? He said, oh, just give them one paragraph and sit down and they'll love it. But I told Jim, I haven't preached for 3 years, so you might want to get comfortable. Once things start cranking up, it's hard to stop. And by the way, we mentioned in prayers, our prayers with you, Jeff, Gail, as you go to Michigan. Marjorie, Zane, our prayers with him and with you all. And wherever else God's presence and healing is needed, may it be with you and with yours. Our readings for today, the first one is from 1 Peter, and I'm reading from The Message, Gene Peterson's The Message, chapter 1, verses 3 through 9. What a God we have, and how fortunate we are to have him. This Father of our Master, Jesus. Because Jesus was raised from the dead, we've been given a brand new life and have everything to live for, including a future in heaven. And the future starts now. God is keeping careful watch over us and the future. The day is coming when you'll have it all: life, healing, and hope. I know how great this makes you feel. By the way, Peter is writing this letter to scattered believers throughout the provinces surrounding Palestine and beyond. By that time, many of them had scattered around and were in very different places. And so he's trying to send this encouraging message to all of these ones who are isolated in various little pockets around the empire. I know how great this makes you feel, even though you have to put up with every kind of aggravation in the meantime. Pure gold put in the fire comes out of it proved pure. Genuine faith put through this suffering comes out proved genuine. When Jesus wraps this all up, it's your faith, not your gold, that God will have on display as evidence of his victory. Imagine a God who would not choose celebrities or powerful things to show as evidence of his power, but rather the simple faith of the people that believed in him and their stories. You never saw him, yet you love him. You still don't see him, and yet you trust him with laughter and singing. Because you kept on believing, you will get what you're looking forward to, total salvation. I had to play with wires in a long time. But it's working, thank you, Mel. The second reading is from the Gospel, from John. Follow up from last week's reading from chapter 20, verses 19 to 29. Reading from the New Revised Standard Version. When it was evening on that day, this is the first day, Sunday of the resurrection, when Jesus has appeared to Mary Magdalene in the garden and told her to go and tell the others. When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and the doors of the house where the disciples had met were locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. And then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father sent me, so I send you." When he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained." But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, put my finger in the mark of the nails in my hand and his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." Thanks be to God. Is that clock right, Jim? Is that... Maybe David was right. Well, you don't have to go downstairs today. You can just stay up here afterwards. So if we push it over a few minutes, that's all right. When I was, I'm going to share with you a short reading that some of you may remember. I used it at other places. Usually at Christmas is when I read it. One of my Sunday school teachers, she was also a Latin teacher at a high school near where I grew up, not the one that I went to. And she was the one that actually helped us get a youth group started at our church when I was a teenager, and kept it going for quite a long time. She was a very neat lady. She very smart, very intellectually. She taught Latin. That's it. And not only that, the students who took her Latin classes liked it. So that says something about the kind of teacher she was. She had a way of explaining things, just putting things very simply in phrases and things that sort of summed it up and said, "Oh yeah, that's right. That's the way it is." Well, one day when this was just before we moved here, we're still in Beaver Lodge, and she sent us a Christmas card, and she tucked into it this little reading she had written. She did this from time to time in her last years. She would sit and just write these little things. This one's called "God Looked Down." God looked down on his people, and he did not like what he saw. "I made them to love me and be my friends, but they don't even know me. They are lost and confused. I sent Moses and the law, but they cannot keep the law. I sent them prophets, but they did not listen to them. I'm going down there myself." The angel who stands by God's right hand was aghast. "You can't do that." God silenced him with a look, for the angel knew perfectly well that God could do anything. But it isn't fitting for the Lord of all creation to descend on people. When you love someone and they're in trouble, you go to them. "That is fitting for me," said God. When the angel saw that it was indeed the intention of God's heart to go. He bowed his head and raised it and said, well, we must make arrangements. Will you descend on a stairway of stars? And we must have a golden chariot to carry you in glory through the streets of the city. A legion of angels. Keep back all the people. And Gabriel, with his trumpet, a band of choristers to announce your coming. God laughed. No. No stairway of stars, no golden chariot, and certainly no angels to keep back the people. I will go to them as one of them. I will live with my people. And so the great news spread through the halls of heaven. The cherubim ran and the seraphim shouted and sang. But the tall angel did not shout, and he did not sing. Don't go, he said. They will kill you. I know, said God. And he went. Well, does that sum it up pretty good? Go Mary. Nice work. It's always gotten me. One of the things I particularly like about it is that it gives us a bit of a sense of what God's heart was in coming to us and living as one of us, and a sense of God's knowledge of who we really are and what is likely to happen to him when he comes. Please we have it the right side up. And that brings us very quickly to the events of the past couple of weeks, because we know what happened, and we know that is exactly what happened. It's interesting in the story we have from John today. I'm going to be jumping around probably here. And Mel said, we got the microphone working so you can do all your Mick Jagger moves. More like support. It's really a story of more than just Thomas. It's all the disciples here, but Peter, we read from Peter. Peter wrote later. We know Peter's story. We know his cowardice on that Thursday night, to the point where he just completely withdrew and said, no, I haven't a clue what you're even talking about. I don't know this guy. And I suspect, and we know the story from Thursday night, from the telling of the story and the candles and the tenebrae. It wasn't just Peter. It was all of them. They all ran. So I sometimes wonder what they were thinking and feeling in that room that evening. The word had come in from a woman, and not just any woman, but a woman with a past. Interesting that God chose this master of the universe, creator of all things, visible and invisible, chose a woman in a society where women had no power, no rights, and a woman with a past to be the first one to tell the good news, to just let her see him. What kind of a God is this, really? And Peter would go from there, from that room, and later on through the 7 weeks or so that Jesus stayed and showed up here and there in various places with them. We know the story where he goes to the seashore where they had breakfast together. And then finally, the final piece of the puzzle for Peter was Jesus pulling him aside after breakfast and saying, okay, Peter, here's your chance. Do you really love me? And by that time, the Spirit had already been working in Peter. He had been in the room with Jesus. He knew he was back. He knew all these things, but the shame, this was dark for him, really dark. And it took all that time, and it took that one-on-one with Jesus to finally bring him out, for him to say, yes, you know I love you. And Thomas, for whatever reason, wasn't there that night. Maybe he was one who preferred solitude in the midst of his grief. We all grieve differently. A fact that we try to get out there whenever we have to go through these experiences, to provide the space for each of us to grieve in the way that we need to grieve. Maybe Thomas was like that. And he had heard from the others that Jesus had showed up in the room that night. And we're not going to get into a great discussion of his doubting here, except to be thankful that the story is there, because it says to us that there's nothing at all wrong with doubting. It's a perfectly human thing for us to do. And it's often when we face those doubts and come through them and work through them that we come out on the other side to see the truth where the light shines even more clearly than we saw it before. But he wasn't there that night. And the first time Jesus shows up, the very first thing he says, Jesus, God, has a way of meeting our needs, tailoring his presence and his gifts to our specific needs. And here they are, huddled together in a room with doors locked, afraid that they're coming after them next. They didn't. Somebody else came through that door. I mean, the Jews could have easily busted open that door. The locks would never have stopped the temple police. But somebody does come through that door, and it is Jesus. And we can only imagine what went through their hearts. I suspect there was a little bit of fear there. You know, in other places, when he displayed some of the power, the strength of his power in the boat, feeding the 5,000, all the other places, the gospel writers tell us that one of the things disciples felt was terror. Who are you? Who is this man? And I suspect that there was a little of that maybe going on in the room when he showed up. I mean, there they are in the room, and they can't turn around and turn away from him. They're in a locked room. So it's confront, face, there he is. And what's the first thing he says? Peace be with you. Their most immediate need was to say, hey guys, it's all good. Yeah, I'm here. It's all good. And peace be with you. Maybe that calmed them down a bit, to the point where they could begin to, but is this possible? Can it be? There's a hint of that name. Can it be? And what's the next thing he does? Look, guys. Look at my hands. My side. He's very quick to show them his wounds. And we can only assume that these wounds are somewhat fresh and raw. It's only been 3 days. They're real. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons, that's how he understood they needed to see what he had been through. They needed to know that the one they're looking at is the very same one they saw hanging on that cross. It's real. It's real. Our granddaughter, many of you know because of all the things that she's been through, Claire, has been dancing the last couple of years. And that in itself is cause for praise and rejoicing. This year she had one dance, jazz dance, and it was A Friend Like Me. Is that Friend Like Me from the movie Aladdin? And so it's the genie in the movie that sings the song, right? Friend like me, you can do anything. Well, she loved it. She got out there and I was able to see the first two of her dances, I think. And there was one yesterday, but because they wanted me to work today, I couldn't go. But when I was at one of her dances, after the dance, she comes bouncing out and stands up. I got a big grin on her face. And the costume that they wore is, there's a little short top here, and then there's the bottom landing, right, for the genie costume, with the bellies right there, open and exposed. And I look down at her and I see all these scars, all these irregular lines in her tummy where they did all these surgeries. And my first reaction was, oh. But she wasn't concerned about it. She was out there dancing away and bouncing around and grinning, and then realized that they were healed scars. Healed scars. And one of the things that healed them was the love that surrounded her through that whole time. Pain, suffering, grief, sorrow, all these things, when we know, you know, we have sat together, we sit with others who experience these things, and they bind us together. They bind us together. And it's the love and the binding that comes as we come together that helps to get us through these things. Claire, at one point, I'm not a big tech person, but we, on the Facebook, when she was going through this, I think it was Crystal, they put a page on Facebook that said, and I know Mel was really good about keeping those of you that aren't on Facebook informed about how things were going, which was great. But on Facebook, you have friends on Facebook. Well, and it tells you how many you have. Well, on that particular page, it was called Claire's Anatomy. There were 580 plus friends, people that had said, we want to join this group. We want you to know that we are there. You may not see us. You may not hear our voice, but we are part of this group and we're walking through this with you. And of course, there would be many who would make comments and were incredibly encouraging with that, or hit a little thing that says, I like that, or we love you, or we care about that. We felt that. We as a family felt that. When we were in the room with her, we felt that we were not alone. It was real. And we know Claire felt that, because in the midst of all of her, she had to go through, she knew that she was never alone. Until that time when she was able to burst out into life. And the stone had been rolled away from her tomb. Scars and wounds tell stories. Tell stories of the real stuff of life that we have to go through. But they also tell stories of a great love that waits with us. And the first thing that Jesus does is to show them his hands and his side. And he breathes into them, which is to say, I'm with you, I'm here, and I'm always going to be with you. This is the Spirit of God that now is with you and will remain with you, as real as I am with you today in this room. And I'm sure that this had to be for them. John says, then it was that they saw the Lord. And their hearts were open. Their eyes were open. And they knew it was him. And then he says, as the Father sent me, guess what? I send you. So we can rejoice and be glad and happy and all that, but remember, there's a purpose here for us. I send you out there. And you'll have everything you need. I just breathed on you. Good thing we didn't have to preach this one during the pandemic. But the symbolism of that act was everything. It goes back to Genesis when the Spirit, the breath, the word in Hebrew is the very same, ruach. The Spirit of God hovered over the face of the deep. God breathed into the dust, and man became a living being. And so Peter can talk about this new life, a brand new life that we have now in Christ. Oh, how new it must have been for Peter after what he had done. Only 3 minutes over. So, I had a quote here, and it's a good one, so I'm going to share it, from one of the people that I follow on one of my sites, Nadja. You ever heard that name since you had it, Nadja? Nadja Bowles-Weber. And she's an Anglican priest who works in a women's prison in California. She says, our scars and sorrow will always be part of our story, but they will never be the conclusion of our story, which means that even when you feel trapped in your pain, or trapped in your past, or trapped in your own story, and like it itself is a tomb, know this, that there is no stone that God cannot roll away. So we know this, and thank God for this. What a God we have, Peter said. How fortunate we are. So get out there. Remember those 2 words. I send you. 3 words. I send you. Think of all the ways that he has sent you folks out, and all the ways that your faith has carried that message out there to others. And that's what it is. Where do we go? Where is he sending us? To others. It's a great counter to the movement in the world that has been with us for a number of years, the self-help movement. Nothing wrong with helping yourself. Jesus said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. He assumed that we would love ourselves and respect who we are as a child of God. But the mystery, the irony, the paradox, I don't know what you call it, is that you really want to find true life, real life. You've got to let go of yourself. You've got to leave yourself behind. And where do we go? We lose ourselves in the service of others. And it is then that we find our true self. So, get out there and do that. And I think we have a hymn now to help us do that. When, here I am, Lord. A long time ago, in one of the bulletins that Mel did, she put a verse on the back of it from the book of Colossians. And I cut it out and I sit it on my dresser. And I look at it most every morning. And it might be a good thing for you guys to take up too. Anyway, Paul writes, so, as you're getting dressed in the morning and thinking about what you're putting on, your wardrobe. So, chosen by God for this new life of love, Dress in the wardrobe God picked out for you. Compassion, kindness, humility, quiet strength, discipline. Be even-tempered, content with second place, quick to forgive an offense. Forgive as quickly and completely as the Master forgave you. And regardless of what else you put on, wear love. It's your basic all-purpose garment. Never be without it. Thanks be to God.